Phoenix promises a 100-year water supply. 60 miles east, in Cochise County, wells are running dry and the land is sinking. Those two realities exist inside the same state, same legislature, same laws, same desert. That sounds like a contradiction. But here's the problem. It is not a contradiction at all. It is the system working exactly as designed. Arizona built deep legal and financial protection around its cities, then left huge rural basins under a groundwater regime where whoever drills deepest usually wins. So when scarcity arrives, Phoenix can spread the cost through billion-dollar infrastructure, recycled water, storage credits, and higher monthly bills. Rural Arizona absorbs the physical collapse first. In this story, we are going to follow how that divide was built, from Hohokam canals to the Salt River Project, from the Central Arizona Project to the Groundwater Management Act, and from Wall Street water deals to the new Ag to Urban program. The key question is not whether Arizona has a water crisis. It is who gets to call that crisis manageable, and who gets sacrificed so that answer stays yes. Start with the contrast itself. Phoenix has 3.5 million acre-feet of groundwater legally secured beneath its service area for the next century. The city only uses 67% of its Colorado River allocation in a typical year, sends 50% of Salt and Verde River deliveries into storage, and reclaims and recycles 89% of its wastewater. On paper, Phoenix looks over-prepared. That is the official image. Now look at Cochise County. In the Willcox Basin, the aquifer has fallen 400 feet below the average historical well depth. Between 1940 and 2015, farmers and industrial operators pulled 5.7 million acre-feet from the ground, nearly double what Arizona receives from the Colorado River in a wet year. In 2022 alone, the basin ran an annual deficit of 108,428 acre-feet, roughly equal to the entire residential water use of Tucson. The state is presenting stability in one place while letting structural depletion intensify in another. The land is already registering the cost. Satellite research covering 2017 to 2021 found the Willcox Basin sinking at up to 6 inches per year, with the surface dropping almost 3 feet over 5 years. Since the 1950s, total subsidence in some places has reached 12 feet. That is not cosmetic damage. It creates earth fissures and permanently destroys the aquifer's future storage capacity. To understand how Arizona built such different futures inside one state, you have to go back before the modern state existed. Ancestral Hohokam communities carved nearly 500 miles of hand-dug canals across the Salt River Valley and supported populations of 50,000 for more than 1,000 years before abandoning the system around 1450 AD. American settlers later re-excavated those same alignments in the 1860s. By 1885, the Arizona Canal had opened the northern valley to large-scale farming. The geography of Phoenix's water advantage is old, but early irrigation was not enough by itself. Natural flow on the Salt and Verde rivers swung violently. Floods in 1891 tore away homes and bridges. A few years later, drought drove river flow down to 187 gallons per second, and many settlers left. Reliability changed everything, and reliability arrived through federal money and senior timing. The turning point came with the National Reclamation Act of 1902. Local landowners formed the Salt River Valley Water Users Association and pledged more than 200,000 acres of their own land as collateral for a federal loan. That funding built the Theodore Roosevelt Dam, completed in 1911, and gave the valley reliable storage for the first time. Over the next century, the Salt River Project expanded into 7 dams on the Salt and Verde rivers, with roughly 750 billion gallons of capacity. That timing mattered enormously, because the Salt River Project predates Arizona's statehood and the later interstate fights over the Colorado River. The surface water rights connected to SRP became some of the most senior and most legally protected in the entire West. Phoenix effectively locked in durable water security before the modern scarcity regime fully formed. Rural basins and Pinal County agriculture never had access to the same starting position. The Colorado River required a different bargain. 40 million people across 7 states depend on it, and the 1922 Colorado River Compact split the basin into upper and lower divisions at 7.5 million acre-feet each. California secured 4.4 million acre-feet through the 1928 Boulder Canyon Project Act. Arizona was left with 2.8 million and fought the arrangement for decades, refusing to ratify the compact until 1944. Even that did not solve the real problem. Arizona's population centers were far from the river, so the state needed a major diversion canal to move the water. Finally arrived through the Colorado River Basin Project Act of 1968, authorizing the 336-mile canal. But Arizona paid for that victory with a permanent weakness. In shortage conditions, CAP water would be junior to California's full 4.4 million acre-feet allocation. California would be made whole first. Arizona would take the cut. The other fracture opened underground. Before 1980, groundwater pumping in Arizona was basically unregulated. Post-war high-speed pumps and rural electrification turned agriculture into a large extraction machine. By the 1970s, the state was pumping roughly 3.5 million acre-feet per year, while natural recharge sat near 1 million. Washington responded with a blunt threat. Unless Arizona passed serious groundwater regulation, the Department of the Interior could withhold the billions needed to finish CAP construction. Governor Bruce Babbitt forced a deal. Agricultural, mining, and municipal interests were brought into closed-door negotiations, and the 1980 Groundwater Management Act passed in a single day without amendment. It is still praised as one of the strongest water laws in the country. What gets discussed less is how selectively its protections were drawn. 5 active management areas covered less than a quarter of Arizona's land, but wrapped around more than 80% of its population. Phoenix, Tucson, and Prescott got a safe yield target for 2025, meaning withdrawals and recharge were supposed to balance. Developers inside those zones faced assured water supply rules requiring proof of a 100-year supply before building. Urban Arizona was brought inside a planning state. Rural Arizona was not. 80% of the state's landmass stayed outside those regulated zones, and about 1.5 million people still live where groundwater follows the older, common law doctrine of reasonable use. In practice, that means water goes to whoever can drill the deepest well. Rural exemption was the political price of passing the act. It also created the opening for industrial-scale depletion that later became normal. That opening pulled in players with far more capital than local residents. Saudi-backed operators, such as Fondamonte, secured 3,520 acres in Butler Valley, and another 3,088 acres in the Renegras Plain Basin to grow alfalfa for export. An Arizona Auditor General report found that the state land department never required meaningful protections for basin water levels, charged lease rates below market value, and failed to monitor efficient water use. The legal framework was not merely permissive, it was actively underprotective. Inside CAP, agriculture made another costly compromise. In the 2004 Arizona Water Settlements Act, Central Arizona irrigation districts traded away their permanent, higher priority entitlements for cheaper access through the agricultural settlement pool. That subsidy expires in 2030. So Pinal County agriculture accepted lower-cost water in the short term and moved itself closer to the bottom of the long-term priority stack. Then the hydrology tightened. Between 2002 and 2024, the Colorado River Basin lost an estimated 27.8 million acre-feet of groundwater, and 68% of that loss fell in the lower basin, mostly in Arizona. Federal shortage declarations stripped as much as 592,000 acre-feet from Arizona's CAP allocation, almost 30% of normal deliveries. Not one Phoenix faucet ran dry. Not one major municipal lawn went brown. The pain moved where the legal order said it should move. For Central Arizona farmers, Colorado River deliveries fell 65% in 2022, and some districts lost their full allocation. Pinal County growers turned back to local groundwater, exactly the behavior CAP was built to prevent. But they were returning to aquifers already projected to face an unmet demand of 8.1 million acre-feet over the next century. The backup plan had already been overused. The economic consequences are easy to model because they are already visible. A 300,000 acre-foot cutback in Pinal County eliminates 75% of cotton acreage, erases $80.7 million in gross farm revenue, and costs 448 jobs. Longer-range modeling through 2060 projects a $2.7 trillion total hit across Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties, along with nearly 7 million job years lost. This is no longer a question of individual farms adapting. It is regional economic restructuring under water stress. Urban Arizona responded very differently. Phoenix Water Services put forward a 6-year capital program worth $12.96 billion, with $9.1 billion dedicated to drinking water infrastructure alone. Pure Water Phoenix, an advanced water purification facility at North Gateway, is expected to produce around 14,000 acre-feet of drought-proof water annually, and has $179 million in federal support behind it. Scottsdale issued $120 million in excise tax revenue bonds for water and wastewater upgrades. Tucson is building a 2.5 million gallon per day purification plant at $86.7 million. Storage became part of that urban shield too. Since 1996, the Arizona Water Banking Authority has banked 4.41 million acre-feet of long-term storage credits underground. Every one of these investments spreads scarcity risk across millions of urban ratepayers over long periods of time. That is how cities buy resilience. They turn hydrological stress into manageable monthly bills and long-dated infrastructure debt. Those bills are already rising. Through the 2023/2024 fiscal year, Phoenix reported raw water costs up 35%, treatment chemicals up 136%, personnel costs up 38%, and pumping electricity up 12%. A 13% residential water usage fee hike took effect in March 2025, and the base allowance shrank, so more households would fall into higher price tiers. Scottsdale's own structure starts at $1.80 per 1,000 gallons and climbs to $8.41 once usage passes 30,000 gallons. Scarcity has become a recurring urban rate case. Credit markets noticed. Moody's physical climate risk models project that by the 2030 to 2040 timeframe, 100% of Maricopa County's projected population will face high or red flag water stress exposure. Fitch still rates the Central Arizona Water Conservation District at AA, but under a 5-year stress case, it sees leverage rising from 0.7 times to 3.2 times. That is the market saying the same thing hydrologists have been saying. Cheap Colorado River water is gone for good. Rural water, meanwhile, is being financialized in a different way. Water Asset Management spent $100 million to buy 12,793 acres in La Paz County's McMullen Valley Basin, nearly 20 square miles of farmland. Local officials called it a water grab. Greenstone Resource Partners used a cleaner legal structure in Cibola, buying about 500 acres, separating the water right from the land, and selling more than 2,000 acre-feet to Queen Creek, more than 200 miles away. Gross profit reached $14 million. For the rural communities left behind, the damage is permanent. Under Arizona law, agricultural land is valued partly on its income-producing capacity. Once the water right is severed, the land can no longer generate the same crop revenue. The assessed value collapses, and so does the county's property tax base. That means less money for schools, roads, and local services at the exact moment the region is already under environmental stress. The state formalized that transfer logic with Senate Bill 1611, signed by Governor Katie Hobbs in 2025. The Ag to Urban program allows agricultural water users inside the Phoenix and Pinal AMAs to permanently surrender groundwater pumping rights in exchange for groundwater savings credits. Developers can then buy those credits to satisfy 100-year assured water supply rules for new subdivisions. The first approval generated enough credits for 825 homes and was calculated to reduce water use on that parcel by 80%, saving more than 437 million gallons per year. Supporters call that conservation. The hidden issue is irreversibility. A fallowed field can, in theory, return to production later if water conditions change. A subdivision creates permanent daily demand, so the program systematically retires agricultural flexibility and converts it into urban lock-in. Arizona is solving one kind of water risk by hardening another. Politics has not kept pace with the damage. A record 130 water-related bills were introduced in 2025, up from 95 the year before. Rural protection proposals still failed. The Rural Groundwater Management Act targeted already stressed basins like Gila Bend, Hualapai Valley, Renegris Plain, and the San Simon Subbasin. It was heavily softened, limiting required reductions to 10% of a user's certificated entitlement and capping annual cuts at 2%. Agricultural lobbies killed it anyway. That resistance reflects how much is at stake. Agriculture supports 24,000 workers in Yuma County alone, where the sector carries twice the economic weight that wine has in Napa Valley. Arizona's combined agriculture and agribusiness economy is worth $30.9 billion. Romaine lettuce adds $525.7 million in annual value. Head lettuce, another $433.4 million. And southern Arizona produces 90% of the leafy greens Americans eat in winter. This is not marginal production, and yet the sector's near-term survival increasingly depends on Washington, not the market. U.S. net cash farm income growth in 2025 is driven largely by direct government payments, rising from $10.4 billion in 2024 to $40.5 billion, offsetting a $12.3 billion drop in actual crop cash receipts. In Pinal County alone, government payments jumped 245% to $13.5 million. Strip out the checks and the bottom line turns negative fast. Washington is also buying conservation itself. The Inflation Reduction Act put $4 billion into Colorado River Basin drought relief, and farmers can receive about $400 per acre-foot to voluntarily fallow land. In many cases, that pays better than the crop would. But the program expires with the current operating rules at the end of 2026. If deeper cuts arrive while that cash support disappears, the replacement revenue goes away, while the water loss stays. That is why the post-2026 negotiations matter so much. The Bureau of Reclamation's draft environmental impact statement includes scenarios under which Arizona could lose as much as 58% of its allocation. Under the worst path, the CAP estimates $2.7 trillion in economic damage from 2026 to 2060. Every financial instrument attached to this river, farm loans, irrigation bonds, appraisals, municipal ratings, would be stress-tested at the same time against a water supply that cannot meet the promises the legal system made. So the paradox comes down to one uncomfortable equation. Phoenix can project security because it has the capital, the legal architecture, and the political weight to buy, store, import, and treat water taken from the surrounding countryside. Urban ratepayers absorb higher monthly bills and finance billion-dollar infrastructure that protects the city from the desert around it. The rural collapse unfolding in Pinal, Cochise, and La Paz is not a separate story. It is the territorial cost of metropolitan resilience. A city that says it is prepared for the next 100 years is not contradicting the sacrifice happening 60 miles away. It is being sustained by it.